And that's probably the last good game they're going to come out with on the Switch.
With the Switch, yeah. 7-year-old outdated hardware.
Yeah. But that's their shtick, really. But you don't have platforms out there that you can release this stuff on. So as a result, you're going to have consolidation. Remember way back when Sega decided that they were getting out of the console business and they had all their exclusives. And they basically, all the sharks that were circling around, Microsoft and Sony and everyone, swooped in to get these exclusives. Well, how many of those exclusives that are exclusive moneymakers now? Sonic the Hedgehog. When was, aside from a really, I don't know, questionable choice on movies, since when has Sonic the Hedgehog been something that's been significant?
Sonic Frontiers. That was like last year.
Yeah.
I don't think it's exclusive though. Is it? I don't know. I have to look.
I don't think it is. But when that happened, everyone thought that you were going to have monopolies come out of that. And you're not. People are going to buy the game that's quality. And if you don't put out a quality game, it doesn't matter how many game studios you own. If it's not quality, they're not going to use it. And Microsoft has run into this numerous times. You know how many people have moved off of Microsoft Office because of how terrible it's become?
Yeah.
And they don't want to pay for the subscription for a service that they've never paid. Just questionable business practices is what turns people off. And Microsoft has kind of demonstrated, they've been the poster boy of how not to be monopolistic at this point in time based on quality.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to that issue of quality, which is exactly what we're going to cover in our next segment. After the break, we'll take a look at the launch of Redfall and other Xbox games exclusives and how they impact Xbox's place in the gaming landscape, and of course, that ever-important question of quality. Right after the break, we'll be right back.
For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 19 of Insights into Tomorrow, where we are talking the Microsoft acquisition of Blizzard and Activision and King. Acquisition and Activision are really hard to say in the same sentence.
That is a tongue twister.
My name is Sam Whalen, and of course we've got Joseph Whalen on the other side, on the ones and twos. But we just talked about the deal itself. Now we're going to get more into the issue of quality and what that means for Xbox going forward. So the big news story in the past couple weeks, if you follow any kind of gaming news, is the release of Redfall. This comes from publisher Bethesda and developer Arcane Studios. You might know Arcane from games like Prey and Dishonored. All great games. Redfall was released on May the 2nd to disastrous critical and audience reviews. This was kind of a big shock. Well, for a while it was a big shock. There was some IGN footage that had come out before the game came out that people ragged on the reviewer that was playing it because they weren't. It looked like they were bad at games. Kind of boil it down. But when the game came out, people realized that that's just the game. The game is not easy to play, and it's really poorly optimized, and it's a big letdown from a studio like Arcane that is known for their immersive sims like Prey and Dishonored. I've played the game myself. I've played Redfall. It's real bad. But it did come out to Games Pass, so I had the opportunity to play it as part of that subscription. Have you seen any footage or reviews or articles about Redfall?
I've seen some gameplay footage of it. I haven't played it myself, obviously, because I don't have my Game Pass subscription. And I've read a couple of reviews. In fact, in preparation for the show today, I was doing some research on it. And you're right. The reviews pretty much across the board are pretty consistent. And when you start getting 4 or 5 people that are saying the same exact thing that's wrong with the game, chances are that's probably what's wrong with the game.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest with you, I'm not shocked, given the hype around this and what the great hope for this was supposed to be. The last 4 or 5 years of games like that have kind of fallen flat. You had Halo Infinite had the same problems. You had Cyberpunk had the same type of problem. Like, you have games that the market is demanding that they come out. You have pressures on development houses that are forcing you to release games before they're ready. And I honestly think that part of the problem with this is largely to do with the cloud infrastructure, because the idea, the philosophy right now is, oh, well, we can kick that out and patch it next week.
Yeah.
We're fine. We're good. Where before, when you put it out on a disk and you didn't have all the cloud infrastructure in place, it had to work. You didn't have the opportunity to put 5 patches out. You know, we just saw it happen with the new Star Wars game that
Jedi
came
Survivor.
out. You know, the first patch that came out was literally 3 times the size of the original game. So it doesn't shock me. I think the problem we have is the market drivers that are forcing these out rely too heavily on the fact that they can be patched, but they neglect to take into effect the negative press that your property is going to get in the process.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Phil Spencer, who's sort of the public face of Xbox, he's not I don't think he's a CEO, but he's like the guy when you think Xbox. He's been doing the rounds. He's been taking the hits for Redfall. But one of the things he talked about was this concept of when to delay a game. And he says it's not always purely based on hitting that economic goal. Sometimes it is for creative reasons. And a lot of what he talked about was ultimately what they say is what it comes down to is if the studio is not meeting their creative goals, then that's when there's a serious issue. And he, like, not so subtly suggested that might have been part of the problem with Redfall, is that, you know, the folks at Arcane were not necessarily making the game they wanted to make, but, you know, this game was hyped up a lot, and it had to come out. And they already delayed it, and it didn't really seem to make that much of a difference. You talk about Jedi Survivor had the same thing. That game got delayed, but still came out with a litany of technical issues, a litany of problems, and a day one patch that was like 100 gigs. So, you know, it's the past like 3 months have seen multiple releases that are almost fully broken at launch, especially on PC. I mean, you play a lot on PC.
Yeah.
PC ports are notoriously not as well optimized as a console. But it really starts to raise the question of, yeah, exactly what you said, this tarnishing of the brand of, you know, it's almost become standard when a AAA game releases to give it 3 to 4 months to have it actually be functional, especially if it's like a multiplayer game. And it's like, at what point did this just become okay? You know, I'm still the guy, I'm definitely part of the problem. I will buy a game day one if I want it. But yeah, a lot of these games are coming out and they're just not finished. And when a game will take 4 to 5 years to make, do we give it 6 to 7 years at that point? Is that too long? Is it an issue of crunch in development where, you know, developers are getting high pressure to put these games out, so they're slipping up and there's issues there? Is it a marketing problem? Are we showing these games too early? You know, we put out a CGI trailer 3 years before the game comes out, and, you know, people every year are asking at, you know, Summer Games Fest and things like that, where's Redfall? Where's whatever? That by the time the game comes out, it's not at all what people thought it was going to be, which is kind of what happened with Redfall. Nobody really knew what it was, because it was a lot of cool CGI trailers. You know, you knew it was a shooter. You knew it was Arcane, so you can imagine you're going to have some immersive sim elements, probably some supernatural or magic elements. But then the game gets closer to release, and you have these people doing previews, and they describe it as like Far Cry or like Destiny, and everybody's scratching their heads of like, what? That's not what Arcane has ever been known for. They're known for single-player immersive experiences, and Redfall comes out, and it's like a Far Cry Borderlands type game, and it doesn't even really nail that, because you know those kind of games don't really perform as well as they used to. You know, and like in the 2010s, that was sort of the formula. You know, massive open world, play how you want. But Redfall doesn't really do that well either, unfortunately. And, you know, I don't want to sit here and just bash the game, because I do like Arcane. I'm a big Prey fan. I love Dishonored. Redfall just wasn't hitting the mark. It's got a current score on Metacritic, the Xbox version, a 56 on Metacritic, 3.5 user score, with critics citing extremely poor performance, uninteresting mechanics, and it overall just felt rushed. And like I said, I played the game myself. That is very true. From the moment you boot it up, like there aren't cutscenes. It's just still images with audio over it, and I'm like, what are we? I don't know, it blows my mind. There's a lot of little issues. There's a lot of texture pop in. You can go watch the Digital Foundry video on YouTube. They did a great breakdown of it, of like the nitty gritty technical issues. And it's like, how does a game like this come out in 2023? It blows my mind.
Well, and a lot of people want to rush to judge Microsoft on this for having a game come out that doesn't meet their standards. And like you had said in the previous segment, Microsoft has been largely hands-off on this project and most of their development studios. So I think the problem that you run into is Microsoft is involved from a finance standpoint and from a make sure it gets out the door on time standpoint. But from the creative side of things, I think Microsoft is largely hands-off on a lot of this stuff. And I think that's probably the problem, is that if you're coming out with an exclusive on Microsoft's platform, Microsoft needs to be there. It needs to be part of that process to make sure that it meets their standards. And it makes me wonder, maybe it does meet their standards. Maybe Microsoft's standards are just that low.
Yeah.
Because what this is a reflection of so many other things that Microsoft has released that is subpar and is one of those kick it out the door, we'll patch it later type things.
Wow.
So it very well might meet their standards is the problem.
Yeah, and it's tough because when you own a studio and you have the ability to make sure that all the problems that modern day releases have don't happen, but you still do, right? Like we talk about Cyberpunk and how disastrous that was. That wasn't owned by anybody. That was CD Projekt Red. That was their game, published on all platforms or released on all platforms, and it had all those issues. You look at a Sony game, you look at Ragnarok, you look at Horizon Forbidden West, you look at Spider-Man 2 whenever that comes out, or Spider-Man 1 even. There is a pedigree to a Sony game. When you boot it up, you know that it's probably going to be awesome, at the very least, or not have a lot of these problems that a lot of modern day games are